When thinking about this morning's Parsha, I can't help but thinking of my years staffing USY on Wheels trips. For me, while I was in rabbinical school, it was really a life-changing experience leading groups of teenagers, Jewish teenagers across the country during the summer. And while it may be controversial to say, when families ask me whether they should send their children on USY on Wheels for the summer or send their children to Israel for the summer, I always recommend the former, because it's easy to find God and connect to God when you're praying at the Kotel, or when you're on the Tayelet overlooking the old city and the new city, overlooking Jerusalem truly as an Ir Shel Zahav. But on USY on Wheels, whenever we would stop somewhere, we would strive to show our teens how to find God in that place. We prayed in synagogues, of course, but we also prayed at truck stops, in cornfields, while seeing sunrise at the Grand Canyon, while waiting in line at Space Mountain. We understood that any and all spaces were spaces where we could and should find God. We learned earlier this morning about the building of sacred space, about the Israelites building the tabernacle, and as we learned, it was that moment that the Israelites understood that God's presence, Kvod Adonai, filled up that space. But we also read from our second Torah scroll, the special reading for Shabbat HaChodesh, the last of the 4 special Shabbatot before Passover. And in that reading, we're reminded of slaughtering the Paschal offering and dipping hyssop in the blood and smearing that blood on our doorposts. Sure, the Torah goes on to tell us that this shall be a sign so that the mashchit, the destroyer, will pass over our homes and we will be saved from that 10th deadly plague. But putting blood on our doorposts was actually more than just creating safe space. It was declaring that space as sacred space as well, a place where God resides. Similarly, in our Haftorah reading for Shabbat HaChodesh, taken from the book of Ezekiel, we read that the priest shall take the blood of the offering and smear it on the doorposts of the temple. We initially thought that the blood on the doorpost prior to the 10th plague was just to prevent that 10th plague. So then why would we have blood on the entrance to the temple as well? In both cases, to paraphrase our patriarch Jacob, it was so that we wouldn't be in a situation where we would say God was in this place and we did not know it. You see, the blood on the doorpost of a Maftir reading and the blood in the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, represented 2 very different relationships with God. One is personal, finding God at home, and one is communal, where we depend on finding God in our sanctuaries, in our synagogues. And as we read in when the tabernacle was completed, the Israelites depended on that communal space to find God. But the Maftir and the Haftorah teach us that it's not a singular place where God resides. It's our struggle to find God in all spaces. It's harder when there aren't many people to help us, to lift us up, so that their kavanah becomes our kavanah. And yet, the Kotzker Rebbe taught, when asked, where do you find God? That God is wherever you let God in. God in all and any spaces. We just need to appreciate God's presence. God wasn't solely in the tabernacle, but the Israelites struggled to find God in the wilderness. God wasn't solely in the temple, but the Israelites, the Jewish people, would make pilgrimage, and in coming together as community, they would find God. God wasn't in the miracles of Egypt, but within the Israelites' homes as they prepared to leave Egypt. With the smearing of the blood on the doorposts of our homes, on the entrance to the temple, praying in a cornfield or at Disneyland. In some ways, we transform each and every space into a Makom Kodesh, for that is ultimately our task, to find God in all spaces, and especially now, without the normalcy of a regular sacred space for us to join together in. That's why all the more so, we strive to find God in our homes, in our yards, in the South Mountain Reservation, in our classrooms. God is there wherever you let God in.